Hello BookTube, Books with Banks back again with my second video in this series. This video is called The Escape from Skullcup and On the Beach, analyzing a beautiful, if painful, scene from Deadhouse Gates, Book 2, in Steven Erikson's Malazan Book of the Fallen. In this series, if this is the first one that you're tuning into, it's a series in which I've been analyzing some of my favorites, some of the most beautiful scenes and moments from Erikson's works. We're going through a scene from the second Malazan Book of the Fallen book today. That's Deadhouse Gates. So there definitely won't be any spoilers beyond this book, at least. I also won't be saying anything really about the first book in the series, Gardens of the Moon. This scene we're looking at today comes from chapter 6, so it's pretty early on, and all it's going to spoil is one specific early plot beat of that one specific storyline from early in book 2. Similar to the first video in the series, if you're unsure about spoilers, I might recommend watching the video anyway, and just sort of treating it like a kind of a taste of what you can expect if you pick up the series, or if you're kind of unsure about whether or not you want to continue on to book 2 or through book 2. All of that said, let's dig in. So the setup here, it's chapter 6 of Deadhouse Gates. In the Tor Mass Market paperback, this is pages 183 to 189 that I'll be reading from. Felison Perrin is a teenager of a noble household and a noble family, and she has been sent away from the capital city of Unta at the heart of the Malazan Empire. She's been sent away from there as a slave to work in the mines on an island off the coast of this other empire-conquered subcontinent called Seven Cities. In her work as a slave, Felison has had to use her youth and her body to appeal to the guards and other slaves in the mines to avoid more painful and life-threatening work, but also to gain favors for herself and her two companions and kind of frenemies / fellow slaves. These are the brutish and violent Bowden and the ex-priest and handless historian named Heberick. A great uprising is going on in the subcontinent's mainland and has kind of been threatened up to this point. And this is an uprising against the Malazan Empire, and violence and destruction has now broken out in the Skullcup mines where these three slave characters are. So these three, with Felison as our kind of main perspective character, they are in the process of utilizing this kind of chaos to escape from the mines in their captivity. Felison has been forced into, in their time being slaves there, she was sort of forced into this abusive relationship with another man in the slave camp named Benneth, and on account of her abuse, or his abuse of her and these horrible circumstances, she is confused. This man and others in the camp have kind of drugged her up, kept her in a confused state, and now Felison, upon their escape, she's confused about her relationship with this man, and she wants this abuser rescued and along for the escape with her, Heberick, and Bowden. So she and Heberick, the ex-priest, they're escaping together. They're heading down to the beach while Bowden, the kind of more brutish, tough guy, he's gone to look for this horrible Benneth character, but whether or not he did look for him, that's kind of a whole other story beat that we don't need to get too much into in this analysis. So here we go. We'll start, as I mentioned, this is starting on page 183 if anyone wants to maybe follow along or, anything like that. So, the western half of Skullcup was in flames, lighting the entire bowl a grainy, wavering red. Heberick and Felison saw evidence of clashes as they hurried down Work Road towards the lake. Downed horses, dead Malazan and dossier guards. Bulla's Inn had been barricaded, then the barriers breached. From the darkness of the doorway, as they passed, came a faint moaning. Felison hesitated, but Heberick hooked her arm. "You don't want to go in there, lass," he said. "Gunnup's men hit that place early on, and hard." I'll stop here just for a second to kind of comment on how already just two paragraphs into this reading, we really get the sense of chaos that they're using to escape and kind of escaping through. And also, interesting point there where Heberick, the priest, he's sort of sparing Felison, Perrin, from going in and looking at what might have happened to these people in this house that she hears a commotion or noise coming from. This is an important action that Heberic's taking to kind of his sort of best efforts to safeguard Felison from certain horrors, and these patterns of Heberic's behavior, we've seen hints of it up to this point, and we will see hints all throughout this scene. But I'll also at the end comment a little bit more on exactly what he thinks he's safeguarding against, and exactly what Felison's actually going through. So I'll get back to the reading. Beyond the Beyond the town's edge, Work Road stretched empty and dark all the way to the Three Fates Fork. Through the rushes on their left was the glimmer of Sinker Lake's placid surface. The ex-priest let her down into the grasses, bade her crouch down, then did the same. "We'll wait here," he said, wiping sweat from his wide, tattooed forehead. The mud under her knees was clammy, pleasantly cool. "So we swim to the cave? Then what?" "It's an old mine shaft leading up beyond the rim, well past Beetle Road. There will be supplies left for us at the other end. From there, it's out across the desert." "Dawson Pally?" He shook his head. "Straight west to the inside coast. 9-10 days. There's hidden springs. Bowden has memorized their locations. We'll get picked up by a boat and taken across to the mainland." "How? Who?" The ex-priest grimaced. "An old friend with more loyalty than is probably good for him. Hood knows I'm not complaining." "And Pella was the contact?" "Aye, some obscure connection to do with friends of fathers and uncles and friends of friends or something like that. He first approached you, but you didn't catch on, so he found me himself." Now when Heberic there is saying this contact of theirs trying to help their escape, approached Felison, she didn't catch on, a lot of that's embedded in what I kind of mentioned, where she's been drugged up and kind of kept in the company of these guards and other these men, other slaves who have been abusing her, and they've been using the drugs to kind of keep her in this confused state where she doesn't exactly always recognize the peril of her situation, but she's definitely experiencing something pretty horrible. But yeah, so that's just a brief reference there. Again, we'll touch a little more on that when I'm done with the reading. So, he first approached you, but you didn't catch on, so he found me himself. I don't remember anything like that. A quote attributed to Kellenved and recorded by the man arranging our escape, Dweeker. A familiar name. The imperial historian. He spoke on my behalf at the trial, then afterward arranged to be sent to Hissar by Warren. He fell silent, slowly shook his head. To save a bitter old man who more than once denounced his written histories as deliberate lies, if I live to stand face to face with Dweeker, I think I owe the man an apology. So while they're escaping, I want to take another kind of pause here to just point out how Heberic, thinking about his relationship with this other historian and how they kind of had a combative academic relationship, this is, just as Erikson does, just layering more and more character development throughout these scenes. This is definitely not the most important part of the scene, and this isn't why I really wanted to read through it, but it was something when I was going back through taking notes that I picked up on, and I was like, oh, that's really cool, and kind of you can maybe hopefully see how him throwing this quick moment of reflection by Heberic and this kind of self-awareness of Heberic in here. It's not a long enough section to distract us and be read kind of as this distracting sort of exposition, but I think it's enough of a flavor of who Heberic is, what his relationship is like with Dweeker, a character in an entirely different part and kind of storyline of this book up to this point. So from there, now we're getting to see a scene in which Erikson is writing basically a horror scene. So brace yourselves. A buzzing, frenzied sound reached them. Remember, they're on the lake shore. A buzzing, frenzied sound reached them, coming from the smoky air above the town. The sound grew louder. Sinker Lake's smooth surface vanished beneath what seemed a spray of hailstones. Felison crouched lower in fear. "What is it? What's happening?" Heberic was silent a moment, then he hissed, "Blood flies, drawn." Then driven by the fires. "Quickly, lass, scoop up mud, cover yourself, and then me, hurry." Glittering clouds of the insects swept into view, racing like gusts of fog. Frantic, Fellison dug her fingers into the cool mud between the red stems, slapping handfuls against her neck, arms, face. As she worked, she crawled forward on her knees until she sat in the lake water. Then she turned to Heberick. "Come closer." He scrambled to her side. "They'll dive through the water, girl. You need to get out of there. Cover your legs in mud." "Once I'm done with you," she said. Note, real quickly, this brief moment of compassion of Fellison taking a break from protecting herself to consider the needs and care for the old ex-priest. He doesn't have hands, and so she's helping to cover him in mud as well. Even though he's asked her to take care of herself first, she, despite what a lot of people will and have said about how harsh Fellison can be with and to her companions, I thought it was worth pointing out that she does this small, quick little act of compassion and kindness for Heberick there, even in such a panic situation. Okay, back to this. "Once I'm done with you," she said, but it was too late. All at once the air was almost unbreathable as a cloud engulfed them. Blood flies shot down into the water like darts. Pain lanced through her thighs. Heberick pushed her hands away, then ducked down. "Mind yourself, lass." The command was unnecessary, as all thoughts of helping Heberick had vanished with the first savage bite. Fellison leaped from the water, clawed gouges of mud free, and slapped them down on her blood-smeared thighs. She quickly added more down to her calves, her ankles, and feet. Insects crawled through her hair, whimpering. She clawed them away, then covered her head with mud. Blood flies rode her drawn gasps into her mouth, biting as she gagged and spat. She found herself biting down, crunching them, and their bitter juices burned like acid. They were everywhere, blinding her as they gathered in frenzied clumps around her eyes. Screaming, she scraped them away, then reached down and found more mud, soothing darkness. Yet her screaming did not stop, would not stop. The insects were at her ears. She filled them with mud. Silence. Handless arms wrapped tight around her, Heberick's voice reaching her as if from a great distance away. "It's all right, lass. It's all right. You can stop screaming, Fellison. You can stop." So yeah, that's a bit of a brutal scene with a lot of gruesome kind of imagery with the blood flies. Don't worry, it's not over yet. We have a little more of that gore to go. But I did want to stop there, and Heberick there saying, "You can stop. You can stop screaming." She's in this moment very much screaming and raging against the pain that the flies are inflicting on her, biting her everywhere, including inside of her mouth. I mean, just how disgusting is that? I feel like the juices of the insects. Oh God. But yeah. So him saying that, and her sort of like deafening herself to her own screaming. I think that's some important imagery too for some of the things we're gonna talk about later, kind of when I wrap up my whole analysis of this scene. All right, so from there, she had curled into a ball amidst the reeds. The pain of the bites was passing to numbness, on her legs, around her eyes and ears, and in her mouth. Cool, soft numbness. She heard herself fall silent. "The swarm's passing," Heberick said. "Fenner's blessing, too fierce a touch for them. We're all right, lass. Wipe clear your eyes, see for yourself." She made no move. It was too easy to lie still, the numbness spreading through her. Again, quick pause as an echo back to how the drugs that some of these fellow slaves and guardsmen would have gotten her hooked on, the numbness, her not moving, being numb. "Wake up," Heberick snapped. "There's an egg in every bite, each secreting a poison that deadens, turns your flesh into something soft and dead. Food for the larvae inside those eggs. You understanding me, lass? We need to kill those eggs. I've a tincture in the pouch at my belt, but you'll need to apply it yourself, right? An old man without hands can't do it for you." She moaned. "Wake up, damn you!" He struck her, pushed, then kicked. Cursing, Fellison sat up. "Stop it, I'm awake." Her words slurred, passing through her numbed mouth. "Where is that pouch? Here, open your eyes." She could barely see through the puffed swelling, but a strange blue penumbra rising from Heberick's tattoos illuminated the scene. He was unbitten, Fenner's blessing too fierce, a touch. So now she's seeing that only she really had to deal with all of this horrible pain from these bites. For some reason, Heberek and this god that he used to be an acolyte for, or the priest for, and he's abandoned. Somehow this god has protected him, and only she's the one that really had to deal with the blood flies. This could be a hint at some kind of furthering bitter resentment between these two characters to come. So, Fenner's blessing too fierce a touch. He gestured at the pouch at his belt. Quickly, those eggs are about to hatch, then the larvae will start eating you. From the inside out, open the pouch. There, the black bottle, the small one, open it. She removed the stopper. A bitter smell made her recoil. One drop on your fingertip, then push that drop right into the wound. Push it hard, then the next one, and the next. I can't feel the ones around my eyes. I'll guide you, lass, hurry. The horror did not end. The tincture of foul, dark brown juice that stained her skin yellow did not kill the emerging larvae, but drove them out. Heberek directed her hands to the ones around her eyes and ears as each sluggishly wriggled free, and she plucked them from the holes made by the bites, each larva as long as a nail clipping, limp with the soporific effect of the tincture. The bites she could see illustrated what was happening around her eyes and ears. In her mouth, the tincture's bitterness overrode the bloodfly larvae's poison, making her head spin and her heartbeat alarmingly fast. The larvae fell like grains of rice onto her tongue. She spat them out. Sorry. I'm sorry, Fellison, Heberek said after she had done. He was examining the bites around her eyes, his expression filled with compassion. A chill ran through her. What's wrong? Will I go blind? Deaf? What is it, Heberek? He shook his head, slowly sat back. Bloodfly bites. The deadening poison kills the flesh. You'll heal, but there will be pockmarks. I'm so sorry, lass. It's bad around your eyes. It's bad. She almost laughed, her head reeling. Another shiver rippled through her, and she hugged herself. I've seen those local slaves, here and there. Normally bloodflies don't swarm. It must have been the flames. Now listen, a good enough healer, someone with high denouement, can remove the scarring. We'll find ourselves such a healer, Fellison. I swear it. By Fenner's tusks, I swear it. I feel sick. That's the tincture. Rapid heart chills, nausea. It's the juice of a plant native to 7 cities. If you drank down what's left in that tiny bottle, you'd be dead in minutes. This time she did laugh. The sound shaky and brittle. I might welcome Hood's gates, Heberek. She squinted at him. The blue glow was fading. Fenner must be very forgiving. Again, an echo or a callback to this kind of building resentment between them, that she was bitten up and he was not. He frowned at that. I can make no sense of it. To be honest, I think of more than one high priest to Fenner who'd choke at the suggestion that the boar god was forgiving. He sighed, but it seems you're right. You might want to offer thanks, a sacrifice. I might, he growled, looking away. It must have been a great offense that drove you from your god, Heberek. He did not reply. After a moment, he rose, eyes on the flame-racked town. Riders coming. She sat up straighter, still too dizzy to stand. Benneth? Remember, Benneth is the man that she knew in the slave camp who was abusing her, but kind of drugging her up and keeping her in this state where she could, more easily be abused by Benneth and other men in the camp. But her being so traumatized, she hasn't been able to think clearly about exactly what Benneth was doing, and she misses him and hopes that he's saved. So she sat up straighter, still too dizzy to stand. Benneth? He shook his head. Moments later, a troop of Malazans rode up, halting directly opposite Heberek and Fellison. At the head was Captain Sawark. Sawark? Sawark. A dossy blade had laid open one cheek. His uniform was wet and dark with blood. Fellison involuntarily shrank back from his cold lizard eyes as they fixed on her. He finally spoke. When you're up on the rim, look south. Heberek cursed softly in surprise. You're letting us go? Thank you, Captain. His face darkened. Not for you, old man. It's seditious bastards like you that are the cause of all this. I'd rather spit you on a spear right now. He made as if to say something more, his eyes finding Fellison once again, but instead he simply reined his mount around. The two fugitives watched the troop ride back into Skullcup. They were heading for a battle. Fellison knew this instinctively. Another sourceless certainty told her, in a whisper, that they would all die. Captain Sawark, Pella, every Malazan. She glanced over at Heberick. The man looked thoughtful as he watched the troop reach the edge of the town, then vanish into the smoke. A moment later, Bowden rose from a bed of reeds nearby. Fellison clambered to her feet and stepped towards him. "Where's Benneth?" "Dead, lass." You, her words were drowned out in a flood of pain rising up within her, an anguish more thorough and shattering her than anything she'd yet suffered. She staggered back a step. So yeah, there we've got her sort of heartbreak and her distrust of Bowden all wrapped in one. Her heartbreak missing someone she, I guess, thought she was close with because of the trauma, this Benneth character, and her being mad and so upset at him not being around, not being alive anymore, probably. Well, that's breaking her heart. Our hearts are breaking because we know this man's been abusing her, and she can't see that through kind of that lens of trauma. So yeah, that just a beautiful moment to kind of finish off that Fellison-Benneth relationship there. And this will be on our mind throughout the rest of the book for sure. What happened to Benneth? Wondering what happened to Benneth. So, backing up just a second, she staggered back a step. Bowden's small, flat eyes held steady on her. Heberick cleared his throat. "We'd best hurry. Dawn's not far off, and while I doubt our crossing the lake is likely to be noticed, there's no point in making our intentions obvious. After all, we're Malazan." He strode down to the waiting bladders. "The plan is to wait out the coming day at the other end of the reach, then set out after sunset, less likely that any roving bands of Dossie will see us." Dully, Fellison followed the two men to the lake's edge. Bowden strapped one of the packs against Heberick's chest. Fellison realized she would have to share the other bladder with Bowden. She studied the big man as he checked the netting one last time. "Benneth's dead, so he says. He probably didn't even look for him. Benneth's alive. He must be. Nothing more than a bloodied face. Bowden's lying." Sinker Lake's water washed the last of the mud and tincture from Fellison's skin. It was not nearly enough. So we'll end the reading there. Could anything ever be enough to wash all of her anguish away? She hoped the lake might. This scene, rife with pain and horror and suffering and these brief glimpses of compassion, this scene and this whole storyline of Fellison in Deadhouse Gates is really what sold me on the series. I knew from this moment on, this beautiful scene onwards, that I just had to read everything else Erikson had to offer. And kind of in conclusion, wrapping up the reading of this and my analysis of it, I want to talk about something, go on a little bit of a tangent here. I want to talk about something I learned about and really got into in some of my genocide studies classes in grad school. And this is the concept of comparing scars. So the idea behind this is that usually it's not a healthy attitude to say after any type of atrocity or trauma that one individual or one group of people had it worse than any other, or in any way, shape, or form than another group or person. And that's sort of like this baseline idea of why we shouldn't compare scars. Basically, you don't want to tell like a descendant of the Roma or Sinti, the less appropriate name, but the more common name is Gypsies. You don't want to tell a descendant of that group that the Jewish community had it worse than them during the Holocaust. Similarly, you don't want to tell like a rape victim that wasn't maybe, beaten up in the face or anything like that or during the course of the crime, that she or he at least didn't have it as bad as some people that were beaten up like that during a rape. So this comparing scars type of language often is really just dismissive and inappropriate and totally disrespectful. It's sort of like you're discounting someone's trauma, saying, oh, well, you had it bad, but at least you didn't have it as bad as that other person. And that's just a really unhealthy way to approach kind of trauma-informed conversations after, you know, these atrocity, trauma-inducing kind of events. So, that being said, let's add a little bit of a feminist kind of theory spin into this. During all manner of atrocities and traumas, there are some significant differences in not necessarily the degree to which people were traumatized and the horrors they experienced, but at least in the manner and like the type of horrors, the manner by which the bodies of women and men are abused. There's definitely distinctions there, and if we're not talking with survivors of these crimes, then from an analytical perspective, we can learn a lot, I think, by sort of comparing these scars, at least as far as gender is concerned, and comparing the experiences of women to the experiences of men in similar situations, and how those experiences differ. While I am a proponent on one hand of like warning about the dangers of comparing scars and how dismissive that can be, on the other hand, I'm also cognizant, or I try to be cognizant of, and I try to warn people about the dangers of ignoring that there are differences between how genders experience trauma, or how, not necessarily how genders experience trauma, but how the traumatic things inflicted upon genders often differs greatly, like as far as the details of what's actually happened to them goes. I would love to have a conversation with Erikson about this and about pointing out how throughout his novels, and specifically in this scene and with Fellison's story, he seems to be kind of literalizing this concept that we should pay attention to what's different about Fellison's traumatic experience compared to the experiences of Heberick and Bowden, and a lot of the difference in the trauma would not have been inflicted on her if she were a man, if she were an older man similar to both of them. But yes, basically the pains Fellison is experiencing are in fact quite unique to her, and I would agree with Mr. Erikson that we, as like a compassionate reader audience, we need to be aware of these differences to truly understand the characters of Heberick and Fellison and the different ways in which both of them are processing the situation and processing the slightly different things they've experienced in large part, or those differences coming in large part because they're different ages, different genders. Furthermore, I just love Steven Erikson's writing of the scene because in using this sort of mystical religious elements of the god Fenner, and in using this horrific and fantastical, though like real world inspired, bloodfly insect creation, Erikson has really literalized a difference in suffering. Sure, we get the gross, gut-wrenching, clinical description of what the bloodflies are doing and how they're dealt with the tincture, but we also get an instance in which Heberick and Bowden have not had to deal with the same type of pains as Fellison, or that Fellison has had to deal with. And then add on top of all of this, Heberick is saddened by the likely permanent scarring of Fellison, and the scars left behind by the bloodflies are perhaps the least of the scars Fellison will have to deal with moving forward, and the least of what she so desperately is going to want to wash away. All that said, brilliant scene. Thank you for watching, as always. The second video has already been added to a playlist with the other beautiful scenes videos in the series, and you can find that playlist on my channel. At the moment, as I am pretty new to this whole YouTube thing, I'm having a little trouble figuring out the card system. I'm putting links in the videos to connect this to the other ones in the playlist. But for the meantime, please feel free to check out my other Malazan content by going to my channel and looking through my videos and playlists. I hope this video has helped people who might have maybe been struggling to enjoy the Felison storyline, and I hope for those of you who haven't read the book yet, maybe this level of analysis, a level that Erikson really wholeheartedly seems to be inviting with his writing style, I hope this analysis and kind of teaser of a really brutal yet beautiful scene might motivate people to give this sequel a try. As always, if you're a Malazan fan and vet, please comment below some of your similar or contrasting takeaways from the same scene, and please let me know other moments you love from Deadhouse Gates. To get notified about future videos, particularly in this series, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. The next video up in a day or two after this one will be a scene, or really a disjointed collection of moments from a scene during the climax of Book 3, Memories of Eyes, and I'm calling this scene "And at Last He Is Done." So that will definitely contain spoilers for one of my favorite storylines from that third book, but if you read up to that point and or aren't too bothered by spoilers, I hope you can look forward to that. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good one. Bye.